Welcome to the Rewire and Thrive podcast. I am your host, Laura Stiles, clinical hypnotherapist and parent coach at the Mindful Generation. You're in the right place if you're ready to transform your mind, break cycles, and reclaim your power for a life of purpose and freedom. Let's dive in. Hi there, and welcome to episode 2 of Rewire and Thrive. I hope you are all well. I'm still very confused as to how it's still January. It feels like it's lasted about 3 years this month, but we're nearly there, nearly at the end now. This week I have had both my boys at home on different days because they were both ill with different things, and then I had a really awful cold, so I felt rough on Monday. Thankfully, I've recovered from that. I hope you're all managing to avoid the bugs, and I hope everyone is feeling healthy. And we're nearly in February, so I actually saw some snowdrops this morning on my morning walk, so that was lovely. Now, today we are going to talk about breaking the cycle of generational parenting. So we will take a deep dive into the ways that we can grow, heal, and become more conscious in our parenting journey. So what is generational parenting? What am I talking about when I talk about breaking cycles and being a cycle breaker and all that jazz? So generational parenting is how the beliefs, behaviours, and discipline styles passed down to us influence the way we raise our children. So we've all heard phrases like, well, this is how I was raised and I turned out fine. I was smacked and I'm totally fine. But did we? Sure, we did survive being smacked or whatever it might have been. By the way, I'm a millennial and it was pretty normal for things like that to happen. I'm sure that people are still doing it a lot now as well, even though I think it should be illegal. I know it's illegal in some countries, but weirdly not in England. But yeah, how much more emotionally stable and confident and connected could we have been if certain things were done differently? So today we're going to just unpack this, look at cultural expectations, and most importantly, learning how to shift away from unhelpful patterns to parent with more intention. So what exactly is generational parenting? Generational parenting is the automatic cycle of passing down discipline styles, emotional responses, and beliefs about what children should be, should in inverted commas, because, who's made this up? The Victorians? Probably. And it's the unconscious scripts that we follow, often without questioning them. So many of us default to this this is how I was raised and it worked fine for me. But if we just pause for a second and just think, I've heard people say or seen people write on parenting groups on Facebook, that kind of thing. I was smacked and I turned out fine. And it's so interesting because just because we turned out okay doesn't mean that we reached our full emotional and mental well-being potential. Do you know what I mean? Imagine... Yeah, you just never know how much better it could have been. So if you think about it, if we were never smacked or shamed or told to toughen up or any of those things that you hear, or even I can subconsciously be in that cycle and say things like, oh, you're all right, get up. And it's to really kind of be aware of when I say those things and realise, well, if we were raised with more emotional validation and giving those regulation tools, things could have been different. And so that's what a lot of us are really trying hard to do with our children these days. But I have to say, our parents did the best. All parents, I think, are doing the best that they can with the knowledge that they had. And so there's no judgment or shame, or I'm not bashing the baby boomer generation or anything like that. But we do know now way more about childhood development, emotional intelligence, how the brain works and mental health. So that means we do have the power to do better. We've got the means to do better. And actually, for the sake of this planet, this is why I set up the Mindful Generation, actually, because the whole mission behind why I started my business was because of the state of the world. And if you look at who's ruling the world, it is a bunch of traumatised little boys in old white men's bodies who are essentially running the world with their egos. So just imagine the utopia we could live in if everyone was parented consciously and we were all doing a better job. And I'm not saying that to make out that everyone's doing terribly. I think it's really hard for mums these days, as you if you follow me on Instagram, you know that, there's a lot that needs to change. But yes, we do have the means and the power to do better than the generation before us. So parenting has changed loads over generations, and that is a positive thing. We are getting better. And in the past, the focus was all on obedience, and children were expected to comply without question. Today, we kind of recognise the value of connection and emotional intelligence, but the shift isn't easy. So, especially when society still pressures us to toughen our kids up. Now, there is a lingering belief, actually, that kids need to experience hardship to be strong. But actually, research shows that connection and emotional regulation build true resilience. And I have said it before, it's more important, especially when children are in those formative years, preschoolers and early years kind of ages. I would say it's much more important to get the emotional intelligence there first. IQ can come afterwards. EQ comes first. Set the foundations with that. We should be, modelling good emotional regulation and building confidence and, kind of helping them to socialise. That all comes before the kind of, the rewards that they start to get at school with, academic kind of targets and that kind of thing, which on another episode, I'll go into that and how I'm not a fan of that. But hey-ho, that's a whole other episode. But another thing that was focused on a lot more in the past was how guilt and shame were just commonly used as discipline tools. So, saying, I'm disappointed in you, or you should be seen and not heard. Good kids don't act like this. Calling your kids naughty so that they can hear that that's now what they've been labelled with. The thing is, shame doesn't teach, it just suppresses. And then what's suppressed doesn't actually ever go away. It just comes out in other ways. So it's not really very healthy. And this doesn't mean that we're going to let our kids do whatever they want. There's a lot of people who think, well, yeah, but how am I supposed to do it? I'm getting told this, and this, and I can't do that, and I can't say that. Well, what the hell am I supposed to do then? And how do I parent in this way without them just being, crazy cats legging it about the place and me having no control? And that is a valid point. It is hard, but we need to just guide them with boundaries and emotional validation. Have you ever tried, by the way, when I first started learning about conscious parenting years ago, when I very first tried to figure out the difference between, so let's use an example. My son was having a massive meltdown once. I was tired myself, and the way that I was coping with it was just almost trying to brush it off, like, oh, yeah, okay, stop crying now, and really not kind of focusing on making any eye contact and really wanting him to just be quiet, trying to distract him. And then once I knew better, just kept comparing that versus like the newer version of me who was like, okay, what I'm going to do now is bend down, get to eye level, make eye contact, use a calm voice, say to him, oh my goodness, I get what you're saying. This is like really tough for you. This looks really hard. How are we going to overcome this? Offering a hug. Most of the time, when they are having some kind of tantrum or meltdown or feeling, overwhelmed with something, just giving that emotional validation, if you try it once and realise just how different they can be when you do it, it's just such a game changer. I'm not saying it, if you're not used to doing it, it can actually take a bit of time to practice it. But over time, they know that they can feel safe in their emotions with you offering that validation. It can be really hard to do if you weren't offered that yourself when you were young. But once you've kind of trained yourself to do it and it comes more naturally after time, you will find that your child's behaviour seems to be improving because that is just the knock-on effect that it has. And that's why I love conscious parenting. So, shifting away from the old patterns, that's the hardest bit, like breaking free from those unconscious parenting patterns. I think, starts with 3 steps. So first of all, awareness, second one, regulation, third one, rewiring. So if we start with awareness, just noticing our automatic reactions. So when your child is pushing your buttons, pause. The power of the pause is a bloody powerful one. Seriously, it's hard. But if you get into the habit of pausing, you then you've created a little bit of headspace to ask yourself, why am I reacting this way? Is this about my child, or is this about my own childhood experiences? That very first point there is so good, because without the pause, you're literally falling into that automatic pilot of the pattern that just repeats. What comes next? Regulation. So you've paused, you've asked yourself, right, is this my child just being a knob, or is this my thing? That regulation of pausing when we're triggered, our nervous system is essentially going into fight or flight. That is what's happening. Fight, flight, or freeze. You might just dissociate and just kind of zone out, and that's freeze. Instead of reacting in the heat of the moment, maybe you just want to yell at them, maybe you just want to walk away and step into another room or run upstairs, which would be going into flight. Instead of reacting in the heat of the moment, you've taken that pause, and now you're basically realising you need to regulate. So it could be taking a few deep breaths, stepping away, but knowing that you just need to get yourself back into a state of calm. So just stepping back into that parasympathetic nervous system state. Or take a sip of water. So anything to kind of break state. So you're breaking that state of mind where you're in that stress response and you are orienting and grounding back to the present moment with a tool, like a tool or a resource, whether it's a sip of water, some deep breaths, or moving into a different room. So you're looking at a different environment. Anything as simple as those three things would be you regulating yourself. I will focus on talking about regulation tools in another episode, because that itself is going to be a whole nother 30 minutes of finding your own resources. But also this really does depend on like person to person. So that's the sort of thing I dive into a lot in my parent coaching calls with my clients. So number 3 is the rewiring. And that is just practicing a new response. So when we do learn to regulate ourselves, we're modelling emotional intelligence to our kids. So instead of yelling, we can say, I need a moment to calm down before we can carry on. I'm going in the other room. I need to go and take a few deep breaths or whatever. That is such a cool thing to do, to tell them out loud what you're doing, because they are going to learn from that, and they're going to say to themselves in the future, oh my goodness, like I'm stressed. And now I need to go and take a pause, and they'll copy. And my kids have started doing it, and it's so awesome to witness that. Because now if I find myself getting stressed, I'll verbalise it and I'll tell them, guys, I need to take some deep breaths, or I'm going in the other room to go and calm down because I'm stressed. And now I've seen my son say that to me. If he's freaking out about something or feeling stressed about whatever it might be, he'll say to me, Mummy, I need to go in the other room and do this, or take some deep breaths, or I need to go and punch the space hopper because I've got a load of anger in my arms. So we're starting to really see how much they've learned from us with this conscious parenting. It can take a little bit of time, but I mean, they're like sponges, aren't they? They learn, and it's so cool when you see them modelling that. I mean, I would never have been saying things like that when I was young. I would have just had a massive meltdown, and then my parents would have said, oh, she's being so difficult again. So there you go. The difficult middle child, that's what I was. Practical steps for change. So we understand the why. Let's look at the how. So practical steps to shift into a more conscious way of parenting are, firstly, replacing punishment with boundaries and guidance. So instead of saying, go to your room, try and say something that's a bit more like, I can't let you do that. Let's find a way to handle this differently. So it means you're validating emotions without enabling negative behaviours. So if you're saying things like, I see you're upset and it's okay to feel that way, it doesn't mean that you're allowing disrespect or for your kid to just punch you in the face willy-nilly. It teaches kids to acknowledge emotions whilst learning better coping strategies. The next point is healing your inner child. So you may have heard about your inner child. You might be thinking, what the heck does that even mean? So we all have our own version of us, like our childlike version of us, within us. And we can often, again, like subconsciously fall back to being the childlike version of ourselves in various situations. For example, maybe at Christmas time when you're around your family more than you usually are, when you're back in that dynamic of being with perhaps parents and siblings again, you might find that in those situations you often fall back into the patterns of how you would have reacted to things when you were young, and they may also be doing the same. So it's really interesting if you do take notice and feel into how you may be acting when you're with your original family members. But your inner child is essentially the reparented version of yourself that, when I say reparented, it might need reparenting. So the way that we respond to our kids is often tied to our own unmet needs that we wouldn't have had met when we were young. So reparenting ourselves offers ourselves the compassion and understanding that we needed as children. And that helps us to show up differently. Next is prioritising self-regulation and mindfulness. So parenting is hard. We can't pour from an empty cup, and taking breaks is really important. And I know it's hard in this day and age where we have perhaps less support around us. Maybe parents are older and they don't have the means to offer support. Childcare might not be very present in your life. But if there's a way that you can take breaks when you can, breathe, move, rest, your nervous system will thank you, and so will your children. So it's just learning to put yourself first a bit more and to get out of that cycle of stress that may be driving you every day, and learn to prioritise your needs, even if it's just 2 minutes of stretching or having a walk in nature, even if it's just around the block. Those little glimmers are going to help you to regulate yourself and feel a bit of mindfulness. So I would also just like to acknowledge that it can be so hard to implement new ways of parenting. And every now and then, even if you are the most wonderful parent in the world, you're going to have moments of stress or your own meltdown. Maybe you are extremely exhausted and sleep deprived, or work is stressing you out and you're just having a particularly bad day or week. There's going to be moments where you might lose your shit with your kids, or maybe you don't have a partner at home for a week because they're traveling with work, whatever it is. We'd all love to be emotionally balanced and present for our kids all of the time. But you throw in the real life challenges and it isn't realistic all of the time. So I think the most important thing to take away today is maybe knowing that you are a human being. You are going to lose it sometimes. Maybe a partner's going to lose it sometimes, and you're going to feel really uncomfortable with that because maybe you're on a conscious parenting journey and they may not be understanding fully what that is. Maybe they were parented in a different way to you, and actually that is a whole nother ballgame of a spanner in the works that can be a really hard thing to overcome. If you were parented by a permissive parent and that's like your go-to parenting style, as in like you don't tend to get angry with your kids or rageful, but you tend to kind of almost let them do what they want, or try and bribe and try and be a bit more passive with them because you might fear them sometimes. And let's say, for example, you have a partner who is a bit more authoritarian. That can be really hard to manage, and it can be really hard when you are trying to do better, or maybe they're trying to do better, and you're both doing things in different ways, which can feel confusing for the children. But if you're on a journey of trying to grow and do things in a better way and improve, and they're not on that journey with you, there's not really much you can do apart from keep going and model what you're doing and show them. Eventually, within time, things will get easier. With like your children's behaviour will suddenly fall into place a bit more. Things will feel easier at like bedtimes or during tantrums or during power struggles. Just keep modelling it and keep going, and that partner will eventually see how much it does work. So that was one thing I was going to say. And the other thing I was going to say is the important bit, which is repairing afterwards. So if you do lose it, if you find yourself just, having your own meltdown, is repairing by apologising when you need to, explaining that you are in a bad place emotionally, you're stressed, you're tired, explaining, I didn't mean to do that, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have acted in that way, I wasn't the parent that I wanted to be today, can we start afresh tomorrow, giving them a hug. I do that. I'm not like, I'll call myself a parent coach. It doesn't mean that I'm this amazing human being that never shouts at her children. I'm realistic, and if I haven't filled my cup and I'm really feeling tired or overstimulated or whatever it might be, I can get angry with my kids, and then afterwards I will apologise and explain that I shouldn't have acted in that way. So, final thoughts. Parenting is a journey. It's bloody hard. We didn't get a manual before we became parents. Hang on, I'm just going to pause it while I have a sip of my cacao because it's getting cold and I really don't want it to get too cold. Bear with me. Oh, that's better. So parenting is a journey, and the fact that you're even listening to this means you care, and that is amazing. And breaking the cycle of generational parenting doesn't mean blaming our parents. There should be no kind of ill feelings towards our parents. It just means that you're taking responsibility for how you choose to parent moving forwards. So small intentional shifts lead to long-term change. And remember, every moment is a chance to do things differently. So again, like that, the importance of the mindfulness side of it, being present, the 9 magic minutes, I talk about that in my programs. And it's essentially carving out 9 minutes a day, separated into 3 separate minutes. So 3 minutes in the morning, 3 minutes in the middle of the day, or like when your children are home from school or nursery or wherever they are. And then 3 minutes just before they go to bed of pure presence. And that means just your full, unwavering attention. So put your phone in another room and literally dedicate your time and all of your energy to your child for 3 full minutes or longer if you can. But I know we're all busy. And do that 3 times a day and just watch how much they light up just to be giving them that attention. You can even invite them, if you do have the time, you can even say, what shall we play? What do you want to play? Because it's not very often that they get a chance to hear you say that. It's usually them that comes to you saying, what can you play with me, mummy? What can we play? Or I'm bored. Or so, bearing in mind that connection is a basic human need. A lot of people might call it attention seeking. I like to call it connection seeking. And it's just so lovely for them to receive your full presence for those 3 minutes of the day. Sorry, for those 9 minutes of the day is what I meant. Okay, I think that's everything. Thank you so much for joining me today. There is a lot more I could say on this. I'm sure that it will just come through as a bit of a theme that's like interwoven into a lot of episodes as time goes on. Because it is a big topic, but I hope this episode resonated with you. If it did, I'd love it if you could share it with someone who might need to hear it. And as always, I do love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to DM me or email me anytime and let me know if this episode resonated with you or if you had any aha moments as you were listening. I love to hear from my community, and if you feel like you could do with finding out a little bit more about how I could support you, then I will pop my link in the show notes where you can book a no obligation discovery call and we could just have a little chat if you're interested. But until next time, take care and be kind to yourself. Bye.